More people are worried about health care costs in retirement than they are about even running out of money. It's 2018. If somehow it's settled into our society that healthcare is the biggest concern that we have, and heaven forbid we do anything without proper health care or health insurance, because remember, health insurance is not necessarily care. It's just crazy how this is just taken over and no one can do anything. It's inertia. If we don't have health insurance, we can't do anything. And I'm going to tell you why you should not be more worried about health costs of retirement than run out of money. It's just, it breaks my heart. So welcome to Heritage Wealth Planning YouTube channel, my friends, the place you come to learn the reality of financial planning. I don't know how else to put it. And we're going to dive right into this. So don't forget to subscribe down below. Subscribe. All right. So, and then you see my little thing back there. Subscribe. All right, so this is a Vanguard study that they come up with. I've seen quite a bit lately, and I figured I'd address it today. So I go to Kitz's blog here, kitz's.com. He talks about healthcare, getting real about annual costs in healthcare. I'm a big fan of Kitz's, and you should read him too. But one of the things he talks about, which I like a lot, is he takes Fidelity to issue. Fidelity has all this study. Every year they do a study. You need $280,000 in order to have health insurance or health care, and that doesn't include long-term care. Ah! And Kisses took them to task because he says, it's weird that you're saying that because no one ever says you need $700,000 for your food and your water or whatever. And no one ever says you need $500,000 for your property taxes. Why do we have this lump sum of health costs? And the reason is because it's a way to get you to save more, invest more, pay more fees, buy insurance products. We get all that. But anyway, so Kitts did this thing on the real base cost for healthcare, and I liked it. I thought it was a great report. The one drawback is falling for some of the long-term care stuff, and I'm going to talk about that here as well. But before we do, let's just look at the Vanguard study because I think it's pretty important because there's a lot going on here, and I think Vanguard, Vanguard and Fidelity are known to be competitors, I guess. But Vanguard since is really destroying Fidelity now. But so I like the fact that Vanguard, capitalism, baby. Vanguard sees Fidelity doing this thing on healthcare, and Vanguard says, shoot, we better get in the mix too. And they take a completely different point of view, which I love. And they engage Mercer Health Benefits to develop a new model to forecast healthcare costs for retirees. All right. So Vanguard believes that retirement planning framework should be adapted as follows. Planning for annual retirement health insurance premiums and out-of-pocket expenses at retirement should be distinct from planning for long-term care expenses. Long-term care and annual health care costs, completely separate things. Could not agree with that more. Completely separate things. Medicare does not cover long-term care. So your Medicare premiums and your supplemental premiums or your Medicare Advantage or your Part D or all whatever you have is not the same as long-term care. Two completely different things. Vanguard is saying they should be both distinct from each other. 100% agree. Some research on healthcare costs in retirement estimates that these expenses as a lifetime lump sum, the Fidelity study. I don't think Vanguard names the Fidelity study. Too bad. I would have loved for them to do it. We believe that a better planning network framework considers those costs as an annual expenses personalized to an individual's health status, coverage choices, retirement age, and loss of employer subsidies. For a typical 65-year-old woman, the Mercer Vanguard model predicts that healthcare expenses on an annual basis is $5,200 a year for a typical 65-year-old woman. We're going to dive into that deeper because you're not typical. You are you, which isn't typical. You are atypical. I am atypical. In the aggregate, we're typical, but that's not you. During their working years, some individuals save at a higher rates to account for potential future incremental healthcare spending. We're not getting into that. Right here. Long-term care costs represent a separate planning challenge given the wide distribution of potential outcomes. Half of individuals will incur no long-term care costs, but there's a small but meaningful risk that costly care will be required for multiple years. We're going to dive into all this stuff right here, and I'll give you my 2 cents, if you will. All right, so healthcare costs and retirement. That's the first chapter. Academics and industry experts have placed a spotlight on healthcare costs that most U.S. households can expect to incur in retirement. Most Americans understand that the annual health costs have been growing faster than inflation for some amount of time. And then we go down here. We say 38% of baby boomers surveyed listed healthcare as their top concern about retirement. That was higher than the fears of running out of money, which boggles my mind. Because if you're running out of money, you're inherently not going to have enough money for your healthcare costs. So it's not rational to have that fear as one of running out of money to be a subset of not having enough money for healthcare costs. As presented by leading experts, and here's the thing that makes me mad right here, because this is where the fear has been generated. The Employee Benefit Research Institute, since at least 2003, has been quantifying the amount individuals need to have saved to cover total healthcare premiums and OOP, out-of-pocket expense, throughout retirement. The EBRI analysis has evolved. This analysis is focused on the figure for a 65-year-old couple desiring a 90% chance of having enough savings to cover total healthcare expenses in retirement. That figure is a daunting $265,000. Boston College has also modeled since at least 2008, and they come up with $197,000. The EBRI and Boston College estimates do not factor in any long-term care expenses either. And then long-term care costs are justifiably a primary worry for many U.S. retirees, given the national average for a private nursing home room is $8,000 a month. Now, we talked about so here we go. But here's what Vanguard says. For a typical 65-year-old woman, the Vanguard model predicts an annual health expense of $5,200 in 2008. This is huge. If purchasing a Medicare supplemental plan F and a standard prescription drug plan. So if you're purchasing a plan F, we'll say it's $200 a month. That's $2,400 right there. And a prescription drug plan, we'll say it's $35 a month. That's another, $300. That's $2,700 a year right there. A standard plan, supplemental policy F is about $200 a month, depending on what state you are. Might be $100, might be $300, depending on your state. We'll just say $200. Your prescription drugs is about $35 or so. So between the two, you're looking at roughly $3,000 a year right there in cost. So essentially, after that, you got $2,200 in co-pays, co-insurances out of pocket. That's not that huge. I mean, it's not cheap, don't get me wrong, but the idea that this is phenomenal given the Plan F, and Plan F is pretty inclusive. Remember, Plan F is going away in 2020. Just keep that in the back of your mind. Let's keep going on here. And they get all these little things here. Healthcare factors. I think this is critical. This is what Vanguard is going to look at. They're going to look at healthcare cost factors. They're going to look at replacement ratios. They're going to look at annual cost framing, substitution effects. So we're going to talk a little bit about each of these here real quick. Healthcare cost factors. Retiree healthcare costs vary from person to person. Financial plans should consider the personal characteristics of each retiree. Factors can include health status and risk, Medicare coverage, retirement age, employer subsidies, geography, Medicare surcharges. Yes, you are unique. You're not typical. You're atypical. Thus, look at your own situation from your health risk. All right, so this is huge. One of the largest factors in understanding potential costs is the volume of healthcare services a given person will consume. Individuals with chronic medical conditions consume the majority of healthcare. If you have a chronic medical condition, you consume the majority of it. In the Vanguard Healthcare Model Index, 12 conditions were chosen based on a mix of prevalence and cost from chronic condition provided by the CMS, Center for Medicare and Medicaid Studies. Our models consider both the individual's medical history and the parental medical history in establishing the retiree's likely health status. They talk about chronic kidney disease, depression, diabetes, hypertension, cancer, asthma, osteoporosis. I'm from Maine, so we always mess things up on how we pronounce it. Whatever. Hypertension, rheumatoid arthritis, heart disease, of course. Certain health care conditions have more impact on future health care costs. And most chronic conditions will have manifested themselves by the time you're in your 50s or 60s. In addition, one's smoker status and a number of doctor visits were factors chosen to classify risk. So we're looking at 12 major chronic risks, most of which will manifest themselves by the time you are in your 50s or 60s. On top of that, smoking and how many doctor's visits you take to quantify how much they think you're going to need for healthcare. Not long-term care, healthcare. And we're going to talk about long-term care in a little bit. The Vanguard study then says high, medium, and low risk. High-risk individuals are assumed to incur healthcare costs associated with the top quartile, the top 25%. Typically, high-risk individuals in our model are smokers, visit the doctor frequently, have 2 or more of the chronic conditions listed above. We talked about hypertension, arthritis, blah, blah, blah. Low-risk individuals are generally free of chronic conditions and incur costs associated with those in the bottom quartile. Medium risk are in the 2 quartile. So the bottom 25% are low risk with no chronic conditions. The top 25% are high risk with 2 or more chronic conditions who visit the doctors a lot. And then you got the middle, the 50%, the top, the second and third quartiles. An individual only using traditional Medicare with Part D prescription drug coverage incurs the widest range of potential annual health costs in a given year. Exactly. This is why 9 in 10 individuals choose some additional coverage, be it Medicare Advantage or Medicare supplements. Exactly. If you only use Part D, you got A and B and D, you don't have a supplemental policy, you don't have a Medicare Advantage, your range and your costs are huge. You might not have any costs. You don't have a lot of costs, because there is out-of-pocket limits if you only have original Medicare. Original Medicare is Part A and B. If you only have original Medicare, you have unlimited upside in terms of the expense. That's all there is to it. If that happens, 9 of 10 people choose some form of additional coverage. Throughout this paper, unless otherwise noted, we choose to model a woman because women have slightly higher lifetime costs on average. However, the gender difference in men and women is only 2%. Our model suggests that a 65-year-old woman living in a median cost area, median 50% above, 50% below, could expect to pay about $3,200 and $6,600 for premiums and out-of-pocket medical, dental, and vision costs in 2018. At the median, she could expect to pay about $3,900. However, that same woman, assuming a low-risk profile, could expect annual costs about 15% lower. On the other hand, a high-risk individual would expect those costs to be 90% higher. So, if you're in the high risk, you can pay more. If you're in the low risk, you can pay less. And you got a nice chart here for those of you on my podcast. Total healthcare costs for a woman in the low, high, and median. And the high, they're looking at $3,500 on the low, I guess $4,600 on the low. What was that percentile? And the 90th percentile. So 90th percentile is $3,500 on the low and $21,000 on the high on an annual cost for a high risk person. A low risk person, the 90th percentile is $3,000 to $4,300. So a big difference there. And the vast majority of people are in the median to low risk. And even the median risk of the 90th percentile is $3,200 on the low and $6,600 annually on the high. All right, so the median on the low is $3,400 on your cost for Medicare for health care in retirement. The median is $3,400 on the low. The median on the middle is $3,900, and the median on the high is $7,600. All right, so that's, again, we're not talking drop dead cost here. Coverage decisions by Medicare eligible retirees. Traditional Medicare with prescription drug coverage, that's parts A, B, and D, used only by 12% of Medicare enrollees. Good. That means 9 out of 10 have some kind of supplemental policy. Medigap has 21% of enrollees. Medicare Advantage has 32% enrollees. And Medicare with employer-sponsored coverage is used by 35%. Like TRICARE for Life would be the supplemental policies from an employer-sponsored coverage. Or I'm working with a lady yesterday who retired from a city, and they will offer her a Plan N where they pay the premiums for Plan N. So, again, she has a supplemental policy paid for her by her employer, previous employer. Now, she does have to pay her Part B premium. Now, again, that's $134 a month. I mean, it's just, if that's enough to break you, then Medicaid is there. All right, let's see what we're talking about here. Let's keep going down. I'm going to miss all that. Talk about Medicare enroll. Just make sure you enroll on time. Okay. Total healthcare cost. This is pretty good. So if we got supplement. All right. So we're looking at Plan N, Plan F, and traditional Medicare, and we're talking about the medium risk. If all you have is Plan A and B, that's original Medicare or traditional, they're calling it. And your medium risk, your out-of-pocket costs are $2,000, and your premiums are $1,800. So it costs you $3,800 a year if your medium risk with just Part A and Part B. Now, if it's worst case, if you're in a 90% risk, your premiums are $1,800. Again, that's just for your Part B, $134 a month, and then your Part D is going to be another $34. So your total cost is about $1,800. But then you have $18,000 out of pocket if that's all you have is original Medicare Part A, B, and D. And then you'll be out on the hook for an extra $18,200 on top of your premiums if you're in the worst case scenario. They talk about Plan F and Plan N. We'll use Plan N for now because Plan F, like I said, is going away in a year and a half. So the worst case scenario in Plan N is your premiums are going to be $2,900, and then if you have the worst case scenario in the 90th percentile, it'll cost you an extra $10,100 for out-of-pocket costs. The median risk is $2,900 for premiums, it'll cost you $1,900 for out-of-pocket costs, so basically $4,800 to $5,000 a year. All right, a cost-effective choice used by about a third of the Medicare recipients is Medicare Advantage plans. These are private plans that are approved by the government and can vary in cost and their coverage. Provider networks, they must cover everything that original Medicare does, and may also provide additional coverage, including dental and vision. Individuals who purchase a Medicare Advantage plan cannot buy a supplemental plan. Medicare Advantage is not Medigap. They're two completely different things. But Medicare Advantage plans can have a yearly limit on out-of-pocket costs that vary by plan. If they're going to be approved by CMS, Center of Medicare Studies, they have to have an out-of-pocket max. They have to. And remember, if you listen to my podcast and all this with J.O., he'll tell us that explicitly. Some plans may have an additional premium above the Part B premium, but many do not. Medicare Advantage plans typically produce lower out-of-pocket costs for enrollees, but in certain instances, they may be more costly. And you got to remember, you are in a network in a Medicare Advantage plan. So because you're in a network, you got to make sure your doc is part of the network. And if you do a lot of traveling, a supplemental plan is probably going to be better for you. Just because if you're doing traveling, is your network covered if you're going to Alaska? When you're in Atlanta, I don't know, probably not. So Medicare Advantage plans for travelers could be problematic. All right, so we're talking about, I don't want to talk about this. So let's keep going down here. I'm going to keep going down. Bear with me. Okay, geography. This is a huge one right here. All right, where a retiree chooses to live during retirement also affects projected healthcare costs. Geography does not affect Medicare Part B premiums, but it may affect Part D premiums. Absolutely. That's your prescription drug coverage. It also affects the cost of private insurance, such as Marketplace, Obamacare, Medicare Advantage premiums, and supplemental. It absolutely affects your Medigap policies for sure, and your Medicare Advantage plans. Some of these differences are due to variation in the cost of living. Some are due to the differences in insurance providers that serve the state. Like, for instance, in Alaska, there are no Medicare Advantage plans. So if you're in Alaska, you're getting Medigap. That's it. Let's see here. If an individual chooses a Plan F, the largest cost variance arises from the premiums, and the variance in out-of-pocket costs is minimal. In 2017, Plan F premiums ranged from $1,500 to $3,300, depending on the state. The median was just over $1,800. Another factor affecting Medicare Part B and D premiums is income. Medicare premiums are subsidized by the government, but as your income increases, so does your cost. We'll talk about that in just a second. And they talk about, in this, again, for you on my podcast, you can't see, but they give us a map of the United States, and they talk about where the highest expenses are for Medicare Part F. And we got Washington State's pretty high. We got South Florida, Miami's very high. We got, that is right north of New Jersey. I'm not sure. That's Long Island, New York, I guess. The right-hand side of Connecticut, not sure what town that would be. Where Connecticut borders Rhode Island is going to be expensive. The whole New York and Long Island corridor is pretty expensive. This is for your Part F. Georgia's not cheap either, but if you go over to South Carolina, it's among the cheapest in the nation. Well, wow, New Mexico's white. I don't know what white means. That's weird. Is that super cheap, or they just don't have enough coverage? I think that's Utah. So Utah's pretty cheap too. All right, now Wisconsin's pretty expensive. That's Iowa. Is that Iowa? I forgot what state that is. Missouri. That's Missouri. That's pretty expensive. The east part of New York is expensive. The western part is less expensive. Basically, the whole Northeast is expensive. But essentially, the most expensive parts are going to be Las Vegas, Miami, New York City area, and then wherever Connecticut and Rhode Island meet. I'm not sure what town that is. And then the leases are expensive, or pretty less expensive a lot of other places. All right. Medicare. All right. Here's the Part B premiums, the adjustments, the IRMA. All right. So if you are a married individual tax return and you're above $85,000, you're going to pay the Part B, which is $2,200 a year. And then you're going to pay the plan premium for Part D plus $156 a month on top of that. So there you go. So if you're paying, it just shows you again, if you're above $107,000 in modified adjusted gross income, that's actually adding all your tax exempt interest before your standard deductions. If you have $107,000 or more in MAGI, modified adjusted gross income, Your Part B premium will be $32.15, and you're going to pay your Medicare. Your Part D will be the plan premium plus $403 a year. I said a month before, it's actually annually. So you can see it starts getting more and more expensive the more and more income you have. That's called the IRMA, and I can't remember what IRMA stands for anymore, but it's a Medicare surtax. Other factors affecting cost: marital status. Being married has shown to be beneficial for the health of the retired couple. Not only is longevity longer for married couples, but marriage has been shown to be correlated with better health status as well. In addition, joint coverage options may be available to married couples that differ from separate individual policies. Yeah, exactly. There could be a household deduction. Jay talks about that quite a bit, or a household discount on using you and your spouse for the same insurance company. Age at retirement. Evidence is emerging that individuals who work past age 65 have better longevity in health. For example, working individuals have greater longevity as a group than retirees of the same age. That's interesting. I did not know that. So the longer you work, probably the better your health will be. Personalizing healthcare cost estimates. Planning for routine healthcare costs of retirement should be an element of a comprehensive retirement planning strategy. Each individual is a combination of factors that affect healthcare costs, high risk. We talked about that, so I'm not going to dive into that anymore. All right, so let's keep going down. And they talk about the range of healthcare costs here. I don't care. I mean, I do, but it's just not enough to talk about. Implications for replacement ratios. Retirement savers, especially for those many years away from retirement, often have a difficult time envisioning what their retirement spending will be. However, projected spending is critical input for determining the savings rate needed to maintain a comparable standard of living in retirement. Financial planners often instead use a replacement ratio, which is a percentage of pre-tax income at retirement that an individual will likely need to maintain their desired lifestyle, typically 70 to 85%. However, the wide variation in incremental healthcare costs suggests that individuals will encounter at retirement suggests that by blindly accepting these default ranges of 70 to 85% may not be a good idea for retirement savers. Incremental changes in spending at retirement can be small for those who have employer benefits and large for people who don't. And here's Aon Consulting off-cited 2008 replacement ratio study suggests a replacement ratio of 75 to 85%. But what did this baseline case assume for incremental change in health costs? In the baseline case, an employee making $60,000 a year was assumed to have an annual healthcare cost of $1,086. Aon modeled the worst case scenario, and they said there's be an additional cost of $4,800, and we know that's on the low end for sure. So again, it's individual, my friends, individual. You can't just say 2008, the numbers are this. I'm going to fast forward to 2018, because it's got to be your own needs, not what some study says or what the replacement rate should be. It's got to be individually. Framing costs in annual terms. I like this a lot. What exactly does it mean that a female retiree might spend $143,000 or more in healthcare? That figure certainly sounds like a lot, perhaps overwhelming, but is it? While any annual recurring expense is framed as a lump sum rather than an annual flow, it can become daunting. Consider that according to BLS, Bureau of Labor Statistics, the average one-person household age above 64 spends $16,903 per year on food, clothing, and shelter combined. This cost seems reasonable, but when we convert that to a lump sum, we find that if we grow with inflation in a 24-year time horizon, we'll need $400,000 just to pay for food, clothing, and shelter. $400,000 we need. BLS reports that the average total spending on all categories is $31,000 per year. That means our individual need over $740,000 to cover future living expenses. In that context, $143,000 for healthcare seems small. Yes, Vanguard. That man, could not agree with that more. Let's see. We talk about, we'll just keep going down. Right here, I like retirees can expect. Okay, so we're talking about your healthcare costs could grow as you get age. Now we get that. All right, so let's see what else. I want to talk about where healthcare costs have historically grown faster than inflation. Not too concerned with that. We all know that. If you didn't realize that healthcare costs historically grow faster than inflation, just think how many retirees are getting ready to jump into the Medicare realm. At 65, 10,000 people are turning 65 a day. That means a higher demand. The supply has dropped. The demand is increasing. That means prices go up. Basic economics, my friends. Demand increases, supply, the number of docs are out there are declining, and prices go up more so than inflation. Memo, that's how it works. I'm sure you already knew that. Substitution effect. Given these, now in economics, we talk about something called substitution effect. If you have the bread goes through the roof, you might look at a tortilla instead of a bread. That's substitution. Cost of bread goes up. It's very inelastic or elastic. Is that what it is? Elastic? Yeah, it means I can stretch it more. So that means I'm not all that worried about it. So if it's an elastic product that I don't need that much and the price starts going up, I'm going to not buy that and I'll have a substitute for it. Again, a tortilla. I'll give you an example. This is huge. Given that cost growth trends of healthcare, it is not surprising that much of the current discussion focuses on the risk associated with faster than inflation growth in healthcare costs. However, it's important to consider healthcare costs relative to other basic living expenses. Although healthcare costs increase, spending in virtually all other categories tends to decline with age. Where have we heard that before? Oh, right here, the Heritage Wealth Planning YouTube channel. I've been saying that like a madman for so long. BLS data, Bureau of Labor Statistics, support this conclusion. Overall spending declines with age, even as healthcare represents a greater and greater proportion of that spending. Why am I yelling? Because this is so important. You got to understand the 4% rule says you're going to spend more and more each and every year with inflation. Yet we know the vast majority of people don't, even with increases in healthcare costs. As we age, all right, so we'll talk about that. All right, so a decline in total spending can be motivated by various factors, including a diminishing interest in consumption at older ages, increasing precautionary savings for long-term care, or more restrictive financial circumstances. You might be running out of money. That's absolutely true. The trend of higher, okay, so I want to show you this chart here. This is it right here. So focus on this left side right here, my friends. This is how they get you. Oh my goodness, you're in healthcare and costs from age. There's my trusty calculator right here. Your costs for healthcare from ages 64 to 65 are going to increase from 8 to 11%. That's a 3% increase on 8%, which means it's going to go up by 37.5%. And then your increases from 74 to 75 are also going to go up by another 3%, which is an increase of 2.7%. Y'all look at that. Every year your costs are going up by 3.5 to 3%. What are you going to do? Now it's 14% of your overall income, where before it was only 8%. But your overall income spending was going down from 38 to 32 to 29. In fact, so what happens is your healthcare costs represent $3,046 from age 55 to 64, which is 8% of your total income. It represents $3,600 from 65 to 74, which is 11% of your total income, because your total income went down, or your total spending went down. And then from 75 and older, it represents $4,000, which is a 33% increase from what it was in the ages 55 to 64. But your income went down by roughly 25%. So yes, your spending went up from $3,000 to $4,000, from 55 and 64 to over 75. But your spending went down from $39,000 to $30,000 at the same time. So as a proportion, it has gone up, but it has gone up proportionally pretty significantly. But mostly hasn't gone up proportionally significantly, mostly due to the fact your spending has gone down. So the costs have gone up a little bit and your spending has gone down dramatically. That's the biggest chart you should ever see right there. I love that chart. I wonder if I can frame that somehow, because that usually would get people to stop worrying so much about it. All right, how people should think about healthcare costs, retirement, understanding costs, So basically, all I want to say is right here. There's two things. The first one is healthcare costs and retirement, and I'll stop and I'll go to long-term care next. Healthcare costs and retirement, you're looking at $5,000 a year. I completely think that's a fair assumption. If you're paying $200 for your Part F, or your Plan F, I should say, or Plan G or Plan N, and you're paying $134 a month for your Part B and $34 a month for your Part D. So $134 plus 200 plus, what was it? 34. Yeah, so $4,416. $200 a month for Plan F. That's $2,400, and they're using $1,800 here. Another is $34 for Part D and $134 for Part B. That gives you a total cost of $4,400. Absolutely. Then you got a couple copays, a couple out-of-pocket things. $5,000 absolutely makes sense. That's your annual health care cost in retirement. Could you pay more? Sure. But if you got the supplemental coverages, even if it's Medicare Advantage, you know for a fact what your upside risk is going to be. That's it. You know for a fact what it's going to be. And so we can at least nip that one in the butt. Come back. We'll talk about long-term care next, because that's a big one too. Everyone's even more worried about long-term care. So don't forget to subscribe down below. And of course, comments, questions, concerns, always helpful. We'll see you guys next time. Thanks, Dan.